All
All
right,
right.
Robert, it's yours.
Thank you. I'd now like to call the March 19th, 2025 Longmont Sustainability Advisory Board meeting to order. Can we start with a roll call?
Yes, Michelle Roth,
Present.
Mary Lynn,
Present.
Corkett Onaran,
Present.
Robert Davidson,
Here.
Ralph Grosswald,
Here.
Daniel Leonard,
Present.
Ethan Augreen,
Here.
Lisa Knobloch,
Here.
Susan Bartlett,
Here.
Heather McIntyre is here, and Councilmember Popkin is also with us. Chair, you have a quorum.
All right. Well, thank you. We'll start off with our land acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge that Longmont sits on the traditional territory of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and other indigenous peoples. We honor the history and the living and spiritual connection that the First Peoples have with this land. It's our commitment to face the injustices that happened when the land was taken and to educate our communities, ourselves, and our children to ensure that these injustices do not happen again. And our inclusion statement, the Sustainability Advisory Board embraces diverse perspectives from its members and the public. To create an inclusive space where everyone feels welcome to share their opinion, the board asks that all attendees listen and speak with respect and avoid attacks on individuals or specific group identities. Up next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from last month's meeting. Does anyone have any changes or corrections that need to be considered?
Yeah, just a small one. On page 7, in the motion that was made by Daniel to amend, quote, to discuss good land uses, to, quote, for a full discussion about how the land is used, which was literally what Daniel said.
I'm sorry, maybe my audio cut out. What was the change that you were proposing? I found the section that you're referring to, but what was the change?
For a full discussion about how the land is used.
Oh, is that not what is captured in the notes?
It says to discuss good land uses, which implies that we wouldn't discuss other land uses that are not good. When Daniel actually said he wanted a full discussion about how the land is used. I went back and listened to the audio, and that's what the motion was.
Yeah, I don't remember, but I do trust Ethan that you you watched the video. Yeah.
Thanks for capturing that.
Any other?
So then, Robert, we would just need a motion to approve as amended.
Yeah, any other notes or changes? Do we have anyone with for motion to approve with that recommended change?
I move.
Okay, Corkett, any second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor? All right.
Aye.
I think that was everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, up next is the agenda revisions and submission of documents. Is there anything that we need to add to the agenda that's not already on here?
No, it's good to go.
Okay. Ralph?
Things from the board, do we do that now or just when it's called for?
That is a bit later.
Do we add that to the agenda or we don't need to?
No, it's an open period where we can bring up something, but I'm sensing that you want to make sure we leave a little time for that in today's agenda if we can.
Yes, I want to give a quick, 2 or 3 minute overview of the Front Range Sustainability Council meeting that took place, and then also talk about we voted to host that meeting in May, and just a few minutes of discussion on that. So just to when we get to the board, just wanted to mention about that.
Okay, thanks, Ralph. Well, Lisa, you're up with our first item under general business around the fueling station statement proposal from the City Council.
Yeah, thanks. I have two items, both of which I think are pretty short today, so we might have a short meeting. I have a slide deck, Heather. I should be able to share, right? Should be good to go, looks like.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. All right. Can you see that presentation? I can't see the red line around it.
Yes,
Okay. Are you seeing my notes or are you seeing the presentation or like
it is
the?
now the presentation view. We're seeing
Okay,
the correct view.
perfect. Okay. So I wanted to bring something to you all that took place at a council meeting. I believe it was last week, and I'll look to Councilmember Popkin also to feel free to jump in and share anything else. But the city council voted to send to the Sustainability Advisory Board a request to put together a recommendation around development of fueling stations in Longmont. So I'm going to run through with you what the proposal or what the motion was to bring to you all, my proposal for how we handle that, and then we'll have time for any discussion if you all want to change what I have put together. So this was the motion. It was made by Councilmember McCoy on March 4th. This is a link to the video, so into the timestamp in which the motion was made. If you all feel like it's helpful, we can watch that quickly, or I'll make sure that you all have the link to that in your minutes as well. But it was a motion to have the Sustainability Advisory Board make a recommendation to potentially planning and zoning and city council regarding a position on the continued development or appropriateness of future gas stations within the city. So that is what is coming to you all. We're not going to get into all the details today. I'm just going to lay out the process. And if you all agree, we can move forward with that process. Or like I said, feel free to modify that. So what I did was I took that recommendation. I looked at our code. I pulled out what are our key areas around environmental sustainability. That's really where this area is mostly coming in. So the areas I identified are climate resilience, natural environment, energy, transportation, and waste. Water probably should have gone in there as well. I missed that one. And then I pulled out sections of code that currently have elements to them that impact in some ways those general topic areas that we tend to look at from the environmental sustainability side. And where fueling stations fall is within the land development code, which is section 15 of the city code. And the big areas within that are land use regulations and development standards, and to some degree subdivision and improvement standards. So I just wanted to give you all some context where fueling stations fit within our larger code, and then also just from a conceptual standpoint to think about how code elements essentially do or do not support our climate and sustainability goals. So the existing language, just for your understanding, so I wanted to call attention first of all to the definition around a vehicle fueling station, which is an establishment providing sales of, and the way it's currently defined is both vehicle fuel and charging stations. So that does include electric vehicle charging infrastructure. That may also provide minor repair services such as lubrication, oil, and tire changes, but not including vehicle bodywork or painting or major repair. So that's like a separate land use within the code. So this is the definition currently of a vehicle fueling station. Where those are currently allowed, and as we get into this more deeply, what probably would be helpful, I think, is to overlay with our existing zoning map so you understand when we're talking about these zones, what they are referring to, what these zoning layers are referring to. So we have both in the mixed use corridor and the mixed use downtown area, vehicle fueling stations are conditional. And that means that provided they meet certain conditions, they will be allowed to go there. The asterisks on all of these indicate that there are additional use-specific standards that apply. And so it just says if you're a vehicle fueling station, there's also an extra set of standards that have to be met in order for that permit to be approved for those fueling stations to go there. And then in mixed use employment and regional centers, Fueling stations are generally permitted, again, provided that they meet those special standards as applied to fueling stations. And then in section 1504 of 030 is the use specific standards. So there are actually already some requirements in place regarding fueling stations. So a few years ago, the code was changed to essentially prohibit new fueling stations except for electric vehicle charging stations along Main Street. So that was 2022. And then also, again, except for electric vehicle charging stations, they're not allowed within 250 feet of a school, daycare center, residential use or residential zoning district, unless they meet conditional use approval. That's from an air quality standpoint primarily. So we know there's air quality impacts from fugitive emissions from gas stations. And so we want to make sure they're not close to sensitive populations. And then there is this is parking, so it's not really pertinent necessarily to this conversation, but because the section mentioned fueling stations, I did add that just to make sure it's in here, but this is pertaining to how many parking spaces those types of establishments can have. So that's the current state with regards to code requirements for fueling stations. And then the proposed process and timeline that I put together for you all is, as we are doing today, reviewing the proposal, any questions or comments you all want to share. For the between March and the April meeting, I would meet with some of our planning folks to get a sense of, based on what we already have, if they are familiar with other code options that we might want to consider. To make sure that our use of fueling stations and the development of fueling stations is better aligned with our sustainability and climate goals. And so the planning director that I had a conversation with last week had some thoughts based on what he's seen in other communities that I could bring to you all for a discussion at the next meeting. I don't have an exhaustive list of what that might be, but I thought that would be helpful for you all to understand what have some other communities done with regards to code requirements for installing fueling stations. And then you all can review and discuss that at the April meeting. And then I will take some of that back to any conversation or potential recommendations that you all have back to the pertinent staff to make sure that we're running that through our engagement and feedback process so that anything that you all are recommending to council is a viable recommendation that doesn't have potential unintended consequences or things that really haven't been thought through. And you can draft a statement at the May meeting and then finalize that if there's any further conversation that needs to happen at the June meeting. And then sometime in July, we could set you all up to do a special report to City Council. And then it really depends on what decision they decide to make in terms of whether or not it should go to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So if council just makes a policy decision on that, I don't think a lot to go to Planning and Zoning, but if they want some additional feedback or they explicitly want it to go to Planning and Zoning, then we can do that at that time. Councilmember Popkin, I want to give you a minute to see if you want to jump in and add anything from the council standpoint.
Thanks, Lisa. I think that was a useful overview. I don't have a ton to add here, otherwise, other than acknowledge a couple things. First, anyone who watched this meeting, if you did or attended this meeting, will note that I did not support this direction. It's on the record, might as well just own that. I didn't think we should treat this way. I can elaborate if that's helpful for the board, but at this point, City Council direction is to come to SAB for discussion on this. So just note that that is my on the record bias on this conversation. I think I appreciate Lisa's kind of broadening up here to think about this in the context of fueling stations more broadly, both electric vehicle charging and gas stations. This came just out of a little bit of context. To my knowledge, this came out of a planning and zoning decision originally to block an approval of a gas station for a couple reasons that were not because it was a gas station. Then that was appealed by the applicant to City Council. City Council overturned the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision at that time. City Council then also decided to direct this question to the Sustainability Advisory Board. So that is the context for how this has come to the Sustainability Advisory Board. And I can gladly speak to any questions if anyone has it right now, but other than that, I think that's everything I had to share on this.
Looks like Ralph, you had a question?
Yes, I just would like to ask Councilman Popkin, I want to be clear, you opposed bringing this to the Sustainability Advisory Board? Could you just give us a little more context on what your concern was?
Sure. My concern had nothing to do with the board. My concern, to be blunt, my concern was that treating this as a policy decision and to some extent beyond actually, Lisa, can you just put up the motion again? Because it was that motion that was particularly concerning to me from Councilmember McCoy. I think it was your second slide or something. Thank you. So in terms of, the motion was on making a recommendation on the appropriateness of future gas stations and continued development of gas stations within the city. The reason I opposed this motion was because I felt that generally the market decides where that's appropriate. And there's actually a market consequence if you restrict an overly restrictive action here, for instance, would mean that the current gas station portfolio would continue to exist. That would reduce competition actually for innovation, for types of fuel, for cost and pricing, and other services that are offered there. And so there is already guidance in the land use code as to where these should be, or what they shouldn't be next to. So it was more of a reflection on, is this the way to try to fuel switch in vehicles and encourage more sustainable vehicular driving, which I think was the spirit of the motion. And so I just disagreed with the mechanism here of how we were going about that. I hope that clarifies that a little bit. Yeah, feel free to.
Yeah, go ahead, Ralph.
Thank you for sharing that. And maybe this might be more appropriately directed to Lisa. So my understanding, obviously, we couldn't be retroactively passing legislation for existing fueling stations, but was the idea, Lisa, that that the future development, that the Sustainability Advisory Board would be trying to look at how well any changes in what the planning and zoning would do is consistent with our current, sustainability plan? Is that the idea that we would be making recommendations to make sure that any changes were consistent with the overall, Envision Longmont? I just want to understand what our goal would be and see if I can integrate that with what Mr. Popkin is saying.
Yes, I think higher level, that is the intent of it, is to make sure that our code and our code requirements are aligned with and supportive of, and not prohibitive to, our ability to meet our sustainability and climate goals.
Yeah, and I'll just add a note there. That is something I am supportive of. While I was on the Planning and Zoning Commission, I did a number of things to actually try to better align our land use and code and the implementation of Envision Longmont with the sustainability and resilience goals of the city. So I appreciate Lisa's framing here. The motion was very specific in this case, but to the extent the Sustainability Advisory Board wants to broaden that up a little bit here, per Lisa's suggestion, I think that would be well within reason.
Oh, go ahead, Ethan. Sorry.
Thanks. I'm wondering if this motion would include potentially adding restrictions to electric vehicle fueling stations, particularly in light of the threat of terrorism that's been going on across America. For example, if there's Teslas parked across from a school or next to a school, and someone decides to blow those cars up because they don't like Elon Musk, I could put a lot of children at risk. So would that be part of the discussion?
The motion is very specific with regards to fueling stations and the development of future fueling stations. So I don't think that is under the consideration of this motion at that time, but Councilmember Popkin, if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, Board Member Algreen, I understand where your train of thought's going there, and what I would say is, even if you have that concern, the focus here should be on the alignment from a sustainability standpoint, in terms of SAB's thoughts. So you can certainly think about location and siting of fueling stations more broadly here, but I think that the board should contain its decision making and recommendation here to how that is relevant to advancing the city's sustainability goals.
Any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Mary.
We are an advisory board, not a quasi judicial body. So whatever we offer as input is simply more citizen input. And we have, in the 5.5 years that I've been on this board, rarely been asked to do anything specifically of an advisory nature by city council. And I don't understand what would be the harm in our taking this on and looking at it and offering our inputs. We may come up with some points of view that city council has not, and staff in their busy lives and schedules may not have been able to consider.
I think it is within your, that is part of this process, is that the city council is asking you all for your feedback and your recommendation on that. That is for you all to discuss, excuse me, and for you all to develop a statement that you can vote on collectively that gets advanced to city council. So you all are welcome to bring different ideas into the conversation. I will say that we do need to stay within the bounds of the motion.
I will add one more layer on that more bluntly. You have to stay within the bounds of the motion and within the bounds of the committee's purview, of the board's purview here. So you might have a different personal opinion, and we saw that play out in the last meeting too. And you can have different opinions on topics, Board Member Lynn, but as a board member for serving in an advisory role to City Council, the purview here is to make sure to focus from a sustainability standpoint and how it advances the city's sustainability goals and policies that are intended to implement that.
That is quite obvious, Mr. Popkin. I don't think that your comments directed towards me are at all necessary at this time. It's very clear what is being offered to the board.
Great.
Daniel, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Lisa, so my question is just what our next steps are, particularly who actually drafts that first proposal that I think you had scheduled for next month. Sorry, I don't quite remember, but who drafts the proposal? Is that us? We do that. We give that feedback to to city staff to draft for us.
I'm going to pull up my timeline slide again real quick so you all can see that. This is what I put together as the timeline. That would be a decision for you all to make. If you, excuse me, based on your conversation and discussion in April, and we could start working on a draft collectively in May, you all could do what you've done on previous topics where it gets, one person volunteers to write a draft statement and then brings it back to the board for discussion and review. If you all wanted to give me talking points and ask that I draft something, and then you all can do real-time edits and finalization, if that's supportive of you all, it's really the direction that you all want to go to draft that statement.
Thank you.
Yep.
And Lisa, you said you're going to bring some examples of what other communities have done to help us maybe.
Yeah, and that's not to say that those are exhaustive or restrictive by any means. It's just when I was talking to the planning director, he brought something forward that was something around separation agreements where some communities have put into place that, and I take this with a grain of salt because I might not be remembering all the details correctly, but at least within city limits, trying to restrict having all four corners of a certain area be a gas station, because in the future, if those change land use, as you probably know, the cleanup of that in order to redevelop that site is pretty substantive. And if you have all four corners of an area, that can really inhibit like future development of that particular site. So there's some like geographic separation that some folks have put into place, some communities have put into place to try to alleviate that issue in the future. But that was one that's something that's not on my radar at all. And so he had some examples of other things that other communities have done that I just thought would be helpful to bring forward for you all to consider discuss. Again, you all are more than welcome to bring other ideas and thoughts forward as part of the process as well.
Any other comments or questions on this one? If not, then I think we could move on to the building code update.
Great. All right. If you all are good with that, I will plan on that for our upcoming meetings then. The building code update is pretty brief and minimal. It's just to let you all know that as we've been talking about building code updates for primarily electrification, building electrification, we have been letting you all know that we've been delayed in that process because of the delay on the publishing of the 2024 International Energy Conservation Code, or IECC, which those code requirements are housed. And then those finally came out. That timeline coincided to some degree with the state's development of the low energy and carbon code, which all municipalities will be required to put into place on or after July 1st of 2026. And with the Boulder County or Northwest Regional Code cohort that is looking at ways to go above and beyond with the low energy and carbon code, is to help advance decarbonization goals across municipalities. And so all of those things sort of converge, but not at a very convenient time. And so our building services folks, our chief building officer went in front of council in February to talk to them about, the mayor had put forward a motion to advance building electrification for residential buildings. The building services came back to council to say, essentially, we're asking for more time before we make any final recommendations on what those building codes should look like, because we want all of these things to go through their process to completion so that we can do our best to then analyze. We do have a consulting company that we've been working with to analyze both cost and greenhouse gas emissions reductions impacts from our existing code, the 2024 IECC, the state's low energy and carbon code, and then the regional code cohort recommendations, so that we can bring all of those forward to city council to say, here are the scenarios that you potentially have to choose from, or they could direct us to a totally different scenario, but they have both cost information associated with those different scenarios and how that may impact our ability to meet our greenhouse gas emissions reductions goals. So that meeting was just to ask them for more time rather than coming forward just with the 2024 IECC. The other thing is, if we went forward now, and then the state completes their low energy and carbon code, we're looking at potentially some misalignment in terms of what we would then be required to adopt per the state like a year from now. So they did give us more time. We will go back to them in the fall, essentially with those scenarios having been analyzed. I mean, fingers crossed, that's also barring any other unforeseen circumstance that might happen between now and then. But we will plan to bring that information and those scenarios to you all, also to provide feedback on before going to city council, so that they can make an informed decision about which direction they want to go from there. So I just wanted to provide you all with that update, since we've been talking to you all about that for quite a long time. So that is the extent of that. I'm happy to answer any other questions, but that is all I have as far as that update goes.
Well, I am not seeing any initial jumping to questions on that. So I assuming there's not any, we can keep on progressing. Up next on the agenda is our public invited to be heard, but there's no one from the public here today, so we will skip that. We don't have any other business. So actually, Lisa, you are back on deck, if that's okay, with the items from staff, with the upcoming vacancy and interview process for the board.
Yeah, great, thanks. So for those of you that have been on for a while, this process was changed. Heather probably knows exactly. I'm like sometime in the last couple of years, my time frame has all gotten smushed together. But for several years, the applications for new vacant positions for the boards always just went to city council and they reviewed them and they made their selections. A couple of years ago, city council determined that the boards themselves should have at least some interaction and decision making in that process. And so a couple of years ago, it was changed to where those applicants for vacant positions came to the boards themselves to discuss and then make recommendations on who they would recommend that city council appoint to those boards. And then it's still city council's decisions on whether or not to follow those recommendations, but it gives you all an opportunity to say, based on what we know of the board and the priorities, these are the folks that we would recommend. So we are coming up on that. We do have a couple of vacancies that will be coming up in June. And especially because this was a lighter meeting, we still have our April meeting. Oh, looks like I closed my spreadsheet that I needed. But we have an opportunity to determine how you all want that process to work. So what we have done in the past, and I'm going to lean on Heather to correct me if I'm wrong, which I might be, options that you all have is you could nominate a committee, like a subcommittee to run that process and then make those recommendations straight to council, or you could all as a whole board do that process together. And if you all want to do that process together, we just need to work with you to work that into your meeting schedule. And what we did last time is we met earlier than the regular board meeting started. So I think it was a half an hour, Heather. And so we had however many applicants we had an allotted amount of time, and we gave each we essentially divvied up that time for that half hour. Is that correct, Heather? Yeah.
Yeah, I believe so. Ended up kind of being a little bit short, but
yeah,
that works too.
And how do you know off the top of your head, Heather? I'm sorry to look this up ahead of time. How many vacancies we will
I
have coming up?
think we have Ralph and Michelle and Mary all done with your terms. Is that correct? Yeah. Mary is termed out, and Ralph and Michelle would both have the option if they want to reapply. So that's where that stands. And then for that, if you were to reapply, then we would just have you not participate in the interviewing process since you would be a candidate. But everybody else who is still continuing on with the board would be able to help interview, or if you are finishing a term and you're not planning on reapplying, then you would also be able to participate in those interviews.
Thanks, Heather. So I guess so again, since we had a lighter meeting today, I thought it would be a good time to just bring that conversation forward so you all can decide how you want to approach that this year. Yeah, Michelle.
Good, Michelle. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Robert.
I was just wondering when I had until to decide. Like what's the time frame? Interviews and stuff?
Application process is currently open, and they are recruiting for it. And I believe that the deadline is April the 18th. So if you're going to reapply, you need to have your application in by April 18th. I don't remember if I forwarded the email to you all about that, but I can do that tomorrow I'll get that email out to everyone. If you know of anybody else who's interested in applying, then you could also forward that information on to them as well.
And then we would need to decide at our May meeting or by our May meeting to send the folks that we want to recommend to city council. So just so you all can keep that in your mind.
Anybody have any strong opinions? I guess I can say where I am. I had the opportunity to participate in a subcommittee group a few cycles ago, and then we had the whole group 2 cycles ago, and then I didn't participate in it last time because I was up for renewal. So I felt like the whole group worked reasonably well. It's a little harder to handle the logistics. We need to be together for a bit longer, but certainly give a larger cross section of the group the chance to have an opinion. Yeah. Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, I'd be inclined to just go ahead and do the whole group. Yeah.
Does anyone want to make a motion on that?
I guess I wanted to say, last time, did we do just a 30-minute in advance of the scheduled meeting period?
I believe so. Yes, we did 30
I
minutes.
think what we
Heather?
did is we started the meeting at 4 o'clock, or we started the interviews at 4 o'clock, and we pushed the regular meeting to begin at 5 o'clock. So we had an hour for that. We ended up having 6 candidates, I think, that we interviewed. So there was a little less than 10 minutes for each candidate that we interviewed. But that's the way we handled it last year. You guys can make a proposal to do the same or change it up if that works better for somebody else too.
Ethan, go ahead.
What's the policy on extending the application period, which I think happened last time, and it leaves a bad taste in some people who think that it's targeted against them, and we want to open the process to allow more people to apply, so we don't have to choose them. I'm not
I
saying that's
think that the city
what we're
clerk's
doing, but-
office is So the city clerk's office is who determines that, and it's really based on the number of applications that they get overall for across all of the boards. So the reason that they have extended it the last several times is because there have been boards that have a lot of vacancies on them that have got no applications on them. So their intention is to open that longer to hopefully get more people to apply for those vacancies.
Thank you for clarifying that.
And I guess, do we have to establish a start time for when we would do something right now, or can we make it more formulaic, like we want to ensure we have at least 15 minutes per applicant we're considering, or something like that? Is that an option?
I don't think you all need to decide that right now. It's possible. Heather, you said what day is if people,
The deadline is the 18th.
yeah,
and
I
our
was
next
just
meeting
trying to
is
see
16th. Yeah.
when our
Yeah,
next meeting
so-
is the 16th. Okay. I was gonna say, if we knew how many applicants, that would be an easier conversation, but you don't need to decide that today.
Go ahead, Ralph.
Is it helpful to the board to have an idea of how many vacancies there will be, or is it simply driven by how many applicants there are? Because it's probably unlikely I will be continuing, although I've really enjoyed being part of this. So I'm just pretty much about 80% there that I will not be reapplying. I have some other priorities for things I'd like to do in the community. So I don't know if it makes any difference to know. I know Michelle's still thinking about it, but I don't know
So
whether
there
that
will
is-
be 3 vacancies that have to be filled. Whether or not you all choose to reapply is yet to be seen, or that you would be part of the candidate pool. But we definitely have 3 vacancies that we would be looking to fill.
that's automatic. Yeah.
Mhm.
Does anyone want to make a motion for
So is that, I move to extend our May meeting for the full board to review new applicants to the board.
And did you want to start the May meeting a little later to try to have the interviews around the time of our meeting? Just curious. And if it's appropriate for me to ask you a question about how you want your motion to be worded. Just you're making it.
Because I guess we can, I mean, we could, or why don't, can we, sorry, I'm looking at the calendar. We should have an idea of the number of the applicants in April, right? At our April meeting. So we can move now to extend our May meeting for a full board to review our applicants and decide at our April meeting when to start our May meeting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we would just need to know in advance of the May meeting so that we can make sure that we post it
Right.
with plenty of time for people to know that the time is adjusting. So we don't necessarily have to know exact time that the meeting would start today, but I think your motion just to extend the May meeting to review the full scope of applicants for now will suffice, and we can look at the time as it gets closer, maybe.
Michelle, are you asking a question or are you seconding?
I was just
I will
a
second.
clarifying question.
I will second the
Um,
motion that we extend the meeting.
Okay.
Do we have
Steering?
to, in the motion, say if we're doing the whole, all of us as, or I mean, if I'm in it, but as a whole group, or if we have a subcommittee, do we have to
Yeah,
add that motion?
I did. So I moved to extend our May meeting for the full board to review applicants. Yeah. So yes, full board.
Any other discussion needed before we take a vote? All right, all those in favor of the motion? All right, that unanimously carries. So that's easy. Mary, you got your hand up. Or no, I was just a vote. Gotcha. Okay. Well, that's exciting. We got a plan for how to handle this. Okay, up next on the agenda is items from the board. I know, Ralph, you had something you wanted to bring. You want to start us off?
Yes, thank you, Robert. So I have two things. I'll try to be brief. One is just a quick report on the Front Range sustainability meeting that took place in Westminster a month or so ago. It was the topic was nature-based climate solutions. It was at the Butterfly Pavilion. It was really a great evening. It was attended by about 25, 28 people, quite well attended from people along the Front Range. One of the administrators of the Butterfly Pavilion gave a little of the history of it. And then a speaker who was part of the climate basically department in Boulder gave a presentation on nature-based climate solutions. It was really interesting. I really couldn't take the time, or probably couldn't even do a very good job of covering all the interesting points. But he did mention along the way that you could actually change weather by using these nature-based solutions. You could change weather in 5 square miles. If you did this integrated program, you could actually make a measurable change in the weather. So it's quite interesting. And I certainly encourage people, to come to these meetings. And then at our last meeting, we voted that we would host the next Front Range sustainability meeting. There will probably be the steering committee, which I'm part of, is trying to arrange a business meeting in between. And I'll probably have an update on that. I think we'll probably have a business meeting, because these turn out to be information and networking and somewhat social events. So there has not been any business meetings, and I've been pushing to try to find out how to integrate that. And my suggestion was that we have a video business meeting between now and the next event, so that we can see whether or not this group is going to be able to actually have actionable impact on our communities along the Front Range. We and I can report to the steering committee of that group that we have voted to host a meeting. We don't have a date. I don't really understand the mechanics of this. Might be something that Lisa perhaps could address. My thinking about this was generally at these meetings, what's happened has been usually two speakers, usually limited to 15 or 20 minutes. In this particular meeting, the Butterfly Pavilion person spoke for only about 10 minutes, and then the climate solutions person spoke for about 30 minutes and gave a presentation. What I was thinking for this meeting, there are a lot of smaller communities like Westminster, Erie, others don't come to mind offhand, but anyway, that could benefit from the very sophisticated approach to sustainability that we're doing in Longmont. And I was thinking that we may want to do two presentations. One would be to simply have Lisa, who's very eloquent, or somebody like that, give a presentation on what we're doing in this community to see if that helps smaller communities who are not as far along to be inspired for some of the things that we have done. And then possibly as a second speaker, pick a topic that we would like to speak on any of the, I think it was Daniel maybe that mentioned about transportation, but could be on air quality, water. It could be just an informative thing, or it could be directed towards a way, what I would like to see this group moving towards at some point. It's less than a year old, or it's about a year old, and it's still finding its footing, is to find a way to coordinate, something like air quality or something that is more broadly based across the Front Range community. But, it doesn't matter, but we would need to pick a date, suggest a date to the steering committee, which they'll approve, but they'll be fine with whatever we want to do. We need to have a venue, whether we would do it, in a civic building or at the museum or where we might like to be a place where we could, set up some chairs, have some tables and some food. We would need to provide some food. Generally, it's pretty simple. I can certainly help with some guidelines on that based on having attended 3 of these. So what will happen is, people will drive anywhere from a half hour to 40 minutes to get here. So we start usually about maybe 5:45 with food till about 6:15. Have the talks begin 6:15 or so till 6:45 or 7. A little bit of networking, and by 7:30 or so, let people head out because they may have a half hour or more drive to get back. But this is sort of the general format of what has been done, and there really are, I have to say, they're fun. Meet other people doing the same work that we're doing. It's a really wonderful group of people. Always get some inspiration and information, and I think it would be great for our great community to do one of these. So happy to either answer questions or open this to staff with any, guidelines that might be helpful about how to do something like this, because it's certainly beyond my pay grade.
Yeah, I think that we are happy to help support finding a venue. I double check with Becky, but I think we could probably support in getting some food for that event as well. And then we did talk last time about just making sure that we're following all of the sunshine requirements in terms of, posting the event and things like that. So, but yeah, other than that, I don't think there's any specific guidelines or anything that you all need to follow.
Would we like to, does anybody have any thoughts? I'm sorry, Robert, maybe I should be letting you do this, but
No, please carry on. You're good.
do people have any thoughts about this program? How do you guys feel about the idea of sharing what we're doing with some communities who may not be as sophisticated about this, and then picking a topic that might be of interest to us that we think would be interesting to the group? Does anybody have any thoughts about that? I'll let Robert.
I saw Mary's hand as first, so go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, I either can figure out where the hand is or I can't. Thank you. Ralph, I attended the first one with you, and folks are at the phase where they're trying to figure out trash. It seems to be an early trash and recycling. This seems to be an early stage in unified, coordinated municipal sustainability. And since we are fairly far along in that regard, I was wondering if it might be appropriate for us to share what we know and what our experiences have been with creating our recycling ordinances and that kind of thing. Wondering if that would be interesting to this group. And we certainly have staff that are very knowledgeable that could share on that topic.
Thanks, Mary. Daniel.
Yeah, I think waste diversion would be great, and especially because it's a hot topic when it comes to plastic pollution. And so I think, Ralph, to what you were saying about, thinking of this as providing like a guidance opportunity to other communities as well as like a substantial Q&A portion may be really useful as well. Is that, yes, a presentation, but also giving us the chance to ask questions and to get them answered. And I was also going to mention is that it seems like, and maybe city staff could answer this, but would the Civic Center be the easy location for this? Because it also just seems like it's right off Main Street. We have a gorgeous Main Street to show off to anyone who visits up here. And so maybe, that could be a quick solution to find a location for this as well, since it's coming up in May.
It could be. I'm happy to look into it more. The Civic Center can be a little challenging after hours because of security protocols and things like that. And there's the space that you all are normally in for monthly meetings is kind of our biggest community space. That's not the city council chambers. And that can be pretty restrictive in terms of size. And then the council chambers might be a little more formal than you all are looking for from a networking standpoint. But there's some other options, and I think see Mary and Michelle's hand up too. So I'll let you all go and happy to chime back in.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, I think that's very exciting. Thanks, Ralph, for pushing this forward and making it happen. Yeah, I definitely agree with Mary. I think our waste diversion is something I think all of what Longmont is doing is really exciting, and everyone else has a lot to learn from us. I was gonna also suggest I was just thinking about our sustainability plan, and so I wasn't sure about that as a whole, of like where other cities are at with their sustainability plan, or the water reduction, how much we've done, I feel like could be another topic. But yeah, I think just let us know if you need any help with it. I'd be glad to help plan some of that meeting too.
I just wanted to suggest potential venues. I don't know what happens at the fire center meeting place or in the evenings, if that would be available, and also the senior center both have very nice rooms. And I'm wondering if the staff could check into seeing if either of those might be available.
Go ahead, Ralph.
Oh, sorry. Can I ask clarification really quick, Ralph? Sorry, for Mary. Which fire station were you referring to?
So
Heather might know, but I know we have
the one on Pace. I haven't been to any others. There's a nice meeting room there. Is it on Pace?
Yeah, there's one on Pace. There's several
Yeah.
fire stations, and I think several of them have community
Also, you
rooms,
know
but
what? The firehouse is also really nice too. The Firehouse Art Center right downtown is also really nice.
That's what I
The
thought
one
you
on
said,
Pace is
Mary Lynn. Yeah.
The one on
Firehouse
Pace is a
awesome.
little small, but for 20-25 people, it's just fine. And the firehouse is a really nice venue. And also the senior center is lovely. If there's a way we could sneak in a time there, I know that it's very highly booked. Just some thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Mary.
Okay.
I'll look into each of those. The other one that could be an option is the golf course. They have a
really
really
nice room
nice,
too.
yeah,
That's
it's away
great.
from Main Street, so it doesn't quite show off our Main Street, but it is a nice venue. It has a nice view. They're set up for, you know, food and drinks and that kind of stuff too. So I have never booked that room, so I definitely would need, Heather, I don't know if you have a better sense than I about how easy that one is to grab, but it's an option that we can look into as well.
Yeah, we can look into several different options. I was also wondering about a library community room, but I don't know how hard that is to get. I've heard that there's some challenge with that because it's used a lot, but we'll look into several different places that we have and see which one might work the best for us.
I just wanted to point out the main thing that I've noticed from having attended these is, you know, people are strangers to our city. We want it to be easily accessible, parking right in front, you know, to park and try to find a room and everything. I know, having done this in other committees that I've been on, you want to just be able to drive right to the place, get to it easy if you're from out of town, go right in the building and get to where you need to go. So I would just say keep that in mind. I do love the idea of you know, showing off the town. If we could, they could see Main Street or any nice venue that we have in the town. But just keep the practical logistics in mind as we're looking. And then also, I wanted to ask how we would do this with the staff members. I'm certainly happy to work on this. Michelle, maybe if you had said you might be interested in it, and just however this would work that falls within the guidelines. I'm happy to continue to help. And of course, I will interface with the steering committee and give any feedback if, you know, once we want to present it to them.
Also, I was gonna suggest the library too, or I don't know if the Longmont Museum has a good space.
I've been to a couple of benefits there for Longmont Friends of Feral Cats at the library. I'm sorry, at the museum. The parking is easy, the accessibility is easy, and they have set up for food there, and there's plenty of room. So that is one place to keep in mind because I have attended events there. But we can let staff, you know, bring something to us. I wonder, Robert, should we have a motion on the program content? If so, I could make a motion, or if others have other suggestions, I would just be making a motion that we have an introductory talk by a staff member on our sustainability plan, what we're doing in Longmont. And then I think that, you know, waste management, waste diversion is a great topic. Open, doesn't matter to me, anything that people feel good about, you know, I'm fine with.
Well, Ralph, did you make a motion? Because I could turn that into a motion.
Go ahead.
I move that Ralph propose to the board that we host the meeting in May with an overview of Longmont's initiatives and successes and a presentation on our waste diversion efforts, and that we attempt to schedule in a place with easy parking that shows off our city.
Ethan,
I'm all for celebrating our successes, but I think we should also acknowledge challenges. I think that's a more interesting conversation to be forthcoming and honest about challenges, and I think people would enjoy that more to include that.
Are you asking that the motion be amended, Ethan?
Yeah,
Okay, so successes and challenges is fine with me.
cool.
so I want to second that
I'll second
motion
that.
as okay. Thanks, Michelle. All those in favor of that? I think that's unanimous. So yeah, let's do it.
One quick question. How would we determine the date? Would it be for staff to maybe look at calendars and figure out a time? I wouldn't have any idea. Just the steering committee of the council has requested a meeting sometime in May. So we can figure out what makes sense for us, Heather, and make that recommendation to them.
It would be easier in looking for a venue if we had more of an idea of the date that you're looking at in May, just because if I say, hey, do you have some time in May that we could do this? That would be a challenge to find a date that would work. So if you guys can discuss that and figure out more, maybe nail down a date or something, that would be easier.
Ralph, hasn't it usually been the Thursday, the day after our monthly meeting? Hasn't that happened every time?
Well, the one was on a Tuesday before our meeting,
Okay.
and one was
But
on
it
a
was the
Thursday
same
after.
week, so it was
Same week, yes.
the third
It has
week.
been the same week. So,
So
I
a
mean,
Tuesday or Thursday in the third week.
sure, and we have the flexibility to say this is the date we're going to do it, or I can ask the steering committee and get back to you, but I don't know whether we have any restrictions that we want to be sure that we address, because if we tell them we're going to do it, I think Mary's suggestion is a good suggestion that we just pick that same week and either a Tuesday or a Thursday in that week. So I don't know if staff wants to look and see if there's any concerns or anything else important going on citywide that we should know about. If there's a parade that night, we don't want to do it, So, and just tell us and I can make that recommendation. But if you want guidelines, I'm happy to address during that week and ask for their input. But we have the flexibility right now if we want to take the initiative to do what we want to do. So it's up to you guys.
I mean,
Daniel?
maybe we just narrow in then on the 13th or 15th of May. I think the advantage of that too is that's before the end of the school year. So folks, we won't compete with graduation parties or summer vacation plans.
Does
Ethan.
staff need a formal recommendation from us, or can we just say, here's our thoughts?
I can go with the dates that you gave me, the 13th or 15th. That will be easier to find out about location information.
Go ahead, Ethan.
Why don't I take to the steering committee that we have identified these two potential nights and we're going to look to see which venues are available at that time. And I'll look for any input from them and I'll let staff know if I'm sure they're going to be fine with that. But that way, at least we can let them know what we're thinking of and make sure there's no issue from their side. I don't think there will be. Is that okay?
Let's hear what Ethan says first.
So the third Wednesday in May is the 19th. So if you want to do the same week, those are the wrong days.
Thank you.
I don't know that we need to be married to the third week, and I think the points that Daniel made about trying to avoid conflicts with other things that might happen on the calendars is relevant. So
Just as a reminder, as I'm looking, can you remind me, Ralph, about the timeframes that we would be looking at?
I would say 5:45 to 8 o'clock.
And that does that cover setup and tear down, or I would need to extend that on either side? That's the meeting time.
People would come between 5:45 and 6. They would get some food and mill around till about 6:15, 6:20. The presentations would take place between there and about 7 o'clock. Any networking questions, whatever, from 7 to 7:30. Usually by 7:30, 20 to 8. Some people do hang around, they make new friends and they stay and chat. But my recollection is by 7:30, 20 to 8, people have a drive and are ready to get on the road.
Okay, so if we did, if we asked for a reservation starting like 5 to do setup and tear down by 8:30, that should be sufficient?
Absolutely.
Okay.
all right. Well, Ralph, are there any other things we need to talk about on this particular topic?
No, do we need a motion, Robert, that we would select those dates and take them to, or shall I just move forward?
I think you can move forward with that.
Okay, so I'll get with them tomorrow and start letting them know what our plan is and get any feedback through staff to you guys as soon as I hear back from them. Thank you,
Perfect.
everybody.
Are there any other items from the board to bring up today? Go ahead, Ethan.
I wanted to revisit the distal property land use issue. Was communicating by email with our council liaison, and he's interested in this topic, and he might have some updates to share. Is Matthew still here? Yeah, he is.
Yeah, Councilmember Popkin, do you have any?
I'm still
comments
here.
there?
I can respond now. I was actually going to share an update during my time, but this is fine as well. So happy to do so. Thank you, Board Member Augreen. So there was an executive session yesterday for council to discuss this, the details of which are not yet publicly available. But my understanding is that there will be further communication with multiple boards that are involved going forward, as staff and city leadership deem appropriate. Um, the I appreciated board member Augreen's email and the discussion that I missed last month as well at this meeting, after I caught up on the notes from that and the recording. And I just did want to offer an overview, or I wanted to extend an offer that I extended to him as well, to any board member here, which is environmental cleanup, environmental site assessment, and land reuse is a really important topic in planning, development, and sustainable development overall. So I appreciated board member Augreen bringing that up. The offer I made to him that extends to everyone here is, if you have questions specifically on this is a space that I work in professionally, and can speak to more of how that works, what some of the terms mean, the hierarchy of different terms in different situations, how those are applied to redevelopment type projects, from all the way from the beginning of the assessment and acquisition phase of a project or land, through cleanup, through reuse. So open offer on the table. I can offer some clarifications here if anyone has questions, but if you wanted to just have a side conversation and understand something more deeply there outside of this setting, I'd be more than happy to do so. Board member Augreen, was there anything else you were hoping I could speak to today? You're on mute.
Do you have any idea on a timeline for council bringing forward a new referral or whatever the decision will be?
I don't at this time.
From what you said, is it correct that council is considering referring that to this board in addition to Parks and Recreation? Because the ordinance says that they must refer it to Parks and Recreation, but they can refer it to other boards as well. If they
Yeah, it would at least be referred to PRAB, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. I don't believe at this time there is clear direction to send it to the Sustainability Advisory Board at this moment. And maybe just to add, part of the reason for that uncertainty there is because of the negotiations involved with the property owners, which is a different conversation than the environmental cleanup discussion. They are not unrelated, but those are separate types of discussions that are currently happening right now before it might become relevant for the Sustainability Advisory Board. I will keep an ear out there. I understand that there are multiple members here who are interested in that topic, and so to the extent that council believes that it is relevant, I will keep that in mind.
Were there any other board items?
I've got another one, which refers to our meeting next month, which would be in person. And community members have pointed out that it's very difficult to hear the audio in those meetings based on where the video camera is located and the fact that we don't have microphones. So I'm wondering if we could get microphones for each person who's participating in the in-person meeting, and that way when people watch the video they could understand what people are saying.
Yeah, Heather?
So I got that feedback through an email of somebody, I don't remember who it was, but passed that feedback along to Longmont Public Media, who records those meetings, and also city leadership. Longmont Public Media has begun to add an additional microphone on the opposite side of the room to try and mitigate that. So they'll have 2 microphones at the meeting on in April, and then we can look from there and see if there's any further assessment that needs to be done, but they are working on making that better for us.
Thanks, Heather. And thanks for bringing that up, Ethan. Any other topics from the board? All right. Well, we will move to items from council. Councilmember Popkin, I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to bring up or.
Board Member Green stole my thunder on the first one. The only other item that I had was regarding the next meeting. I will not be able to join in person, but I would be available virtually if that was an option to Teams in. Heather, we can take this offline if helpful, but I just wanted to flag it now. I will be at a professional conference in Seattle, so I will not be present, but I could be attending virtually live if that was an option. I guess for Heather or for the chair, if there's any
Yeah.
preferences there.
We have done that for staff members and council members in other board meetings. So if this board is agreeable to that, I can make sure that Councilmember Popkin is able to join us remotely.
I think we all appreciate having a healthy council presence. So if there's a way to ensure that that happens.
I do try to stay healthy, so thank you.
We will get that taken care of.
Yeah.
And again, that is just for council members and staff members that other boards have done that for. So that would be the reason we are allowing it.
Okay.
I appreciate
Any
it.
other items?
Not at this time.
Okay. Well, that brings us just to the reminder about the informational items in our board packet. There are a lot of pages in there, so make sure you read them carefully. And with that, our next meeting is April the 16th. It is in person, so look forward to seeing hopefully all of you there then. Do we have a motion to adjourn for today?
Can staff give an update on what's going to be on the agenda if you have it, if you know what's on the agenda next month?
Ronan, Ronan, sorry. For April, I have we'll talk about finalizing the date and location for the Regional Sustainability Committee and the fueling station conversation, which will probably take up a good part of the meeting. Potentially an update from planning staff on the landscape codes that have been taken to council. And then any other updates that come out of our annual report that is going to City Council on April 8th, which is another thing I wanted to make sure you all were aware of. So that is what I have teed up so far
Is
for the
there a time when
agenda.
regenerative agriculture is going to come up? It's been delayed for many months.
That keeps getting bumped because we have other things that keep coming up that we have to attend to. I do have that potentially slated in for May.
I'm sorry, which item was?
Oh, no, I am sorry. That one I talked to staff and they requested that we look at that one later in the summer. They just hired an agricultural specialist that is getting onboarded and needs to get kind of their feet underneath them. So that was a request from the natural resources staff that we look at that presentation later in the summer.
All right. Well, I think that is everything we had. Is there a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Ralph. Yeah. Anyone want to second that?
I can second that.
All right. Thanks, Michelle. All those in favor of adjourning for today? I think that's everybody. Thanks for the meeting today. And it looks like Mary wants to say something before we go. Oh, no, you're just voting.
Oh my God, sorry.
Raising our hand.
Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful afternoon, and we'll see you in person on April the 16th.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye.